I think the best way to explain how wild of a year it's been so far in the Big 12 is just let me ask you this question, Wyatt.
Okay.
Who is the best team in the Big 12 right now? Who would you say is the best team in the league?
I'd still say Oklahoma.
You still think it's Oklahoma?
Yeah. I don't think it's a far and away lock, but I do think they have probably the best overall skill set. Have they played the best? If that's your question, maybe you'd have to maybe give another answer. But I do think they have the best shot of winning it.
Well, I'm going to say something that I know will sound sacrilege and fairly crazy, but I'm inclined to almost think that Texas may be the best team in the Big 12. I know that they had that loss to Arkansas where they looked terrible, but Arkansas now looks very good, and Texas was playing apparently the wrong quarterback because the numbers on Casey Thompson are absolutely ludicrous, what he's been able to do offensively going back to the Alamo Bowl last year since he started playing. I mean, it just feels to me like they made the wrong decision at quarterback, and with Casey Thompson in there, they're a juggernaut. Now, I understand they still give up 35 points, and they are Texas, and it's hard to really trust them. But, man, I mean, the talent that they have with Bijan and the way Casey Thompson runs that offense, I don't know. They've had a couple pretty impressive efforts against Texas Tech and Louisiana. Baylor certainly belongs in this discussion. So does Oklahoma because of what they have. I think Iowa State, to me, has played their way out of that discussion for now. But Texas belongs in the discussion, if nothing else.
There's no doubt. I think that's a great point on your part because you know how good Louisiana is, right?
Yeah, they've been
There's
great.
no doubt. We didn't know at the time when everybody was chuckling on Monday morning after they lost in Fayetteville. They're not really laughing about that now.
No.
Did everybody notice that Arkansas in Dallas beat Texas A&M 20-10 Saturday and kind of dominated them? That guy has done a fabulous job coaching there.
Unreal.
Unbelievably good.
Well, it also makes me wonder what exactly in the hell Chad Morris was doing when he was there. But, because they were not bad. I mean, they were terrible. Terrible. But I digress. That loss does not look nearly as bad. I mean, the weeks go by and you start to get more and more context on what's going on here. You could say the same thing about K-State and Stanford. At the time, it felt like Stanford's just terrible. And then 2 weeks later, it's like, well, they smashed USC. It's actually a pretty good team. And now, well, okay, they lost at home to UCLA, and USC just got boat raced by Oregon State in the Coliseum.
Yeah.
So, you start to get more data here and things take shape. But right now, the Big 12 is taking a very interesting shape because Oklahoma is still just messing around. I mean, the 3 games that they have played against FBS competition this year, they've won by an average of 5 points per game. And that ain't Murderer's Row that they've faced. And no offense to West Virginia, but it's West Virginia, Nebraska, and Tulane that they've beaten by an average of 5 points per game. So I don't know. It does not look right. I mean, you can watch Oklahoma for 10 minutes right now and figure out that they just don't look right on offense. Like, that offense is just not – something is not working there right now.
Well, here's the deal. West Virginia, I think you would say, is a pretty good football team. They're well coached. I think especially defensively, they're pretty darn good. Oklahoma rushed for 57 yards Saturday. And I'm just going to be blunt about this. At times it looked like they didn't care about running the ball. It was all about throwing it. If they're going to get to where they need to get or where they think they should be, I think they're going to have to be a lot more committed to running the football. Agree?
And they typically have been very good at running the ball, which people don't think about as much.
Now, I know it's early. I understand. But, I mean, they scored 16 points on Saturday against West Virginia. 313 passing yards, 57 rushing yards. They're just not quite kind of where everybody thought they would be yet. Doesn't mean they can't be. But again, back to your point, I wouldn't argue with you. If you said Texas, I kind of get it. I wouldn't argue with that for 4 seconds. I really wouldn't. I could see either one.
But none of this is any disrespect to Baylor, who certainly, in terms of if we're talking about best wins in the league, I mean, beating Iowa State, I think, is probably the best league win that anybody has right now. That's incredibly impressive to give some validity to what they did against Kansas and then, some rummies in the non-conference schedule. Mm-hmm. So plenty of respect to Baylor, and Gary Bohannon has played as well as about anybody at quarterback in the league so far, all of those things. The point here is just that this feels very fun, for what the league season is going to shape up to be.
Agreed.
Much like the whole college football season has taken on this tone where it feels like it's going to be more fun than it has been in past years because you just don't have, I mean, typically in the Big 12, it's like, look, Oklahoma's going to run away from everybody. And then nationally, it's going to be Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and that's it. And now this year, you look at it like Clemson's got 2 losses. Ohio State looks very, very flawed. Oklahoma looks extremely flawed. Even Alabama, I mean, they got pushed in the swamp by Florida. It just seems like it's going to be so much more fun of a season, both in college football and then the Big 12 also being very emblematic of where things sit right now.
And I'll be honest, I agree with everything you said, and I hope it plays out that way. It would be great to see maybe a new face or two in the Final Four. Wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. I mean, the tough part here is it's like, I think you're conflicted if you're a school that's not Oklahoma or Texas in the Big 12. Like, typically every year I'd be saying, like, there's a part of this, like, you want to root for Oklahoma to roll through this thing and get to the playoff.
Right.
Does it matter anymore? I mean, now that they're leaving, I don't know that it matters so much anymore. I would argue what's more important to K-State, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, those schools, is that Cincinnati beats Notre Dame this weekend.
Well, it's a great point, John.
I mean, I think that's more important.
Yeah.
Because you need Cincinnati, you need BYU to keep winning.
Yeah.
UCF's already lost a game, but however positively they can finish
I think
the season.
BYU's already gone through most of the Pac-12.
Yeah.
I think they play Utah State this week. Those 2 teams are pretty darn good. I think Houston and UCF are a little bit below those 2. Not to say that that's bad necessarily, but both BYU. I mean, BYU's in the top 25. Cincinnati's in the top 8?
Yep.
That's pretty legit.
It is, but
And if they beat Notre Dame, can you imagine the kind of weight that will carry for a while?
Yeah, at Notre Dame. So, huge game.
Oh,
I mean,
my.
huge game.
For Notre Dame, too, to be honest.
Yes.
Yeah.
But Cincinnati, and by proxy, the Big 12, the remaining 8 teams of the Big 12 got a lot of help because Notre Dame, it was the perfect cocktail for Cincinnati. Notre Dame won and wound up blasting Wisconsin. So the perception of Notre Dame goes way up in the eyes of people nationally. But Notre Dame also lost its quarterback and comes out of the game pretty beat up.
Yeah.
So you think that they're more vulnerable. Well, Cincinnati had a bye week. So it could not have worked out much better for Cincinnati on that front.
Yeah, it will be, and I think there are 4 top 25 games this week where top 25 teams play each other. I think most of the country will be more locked into that one than most. And you've got what? What are the others? I remember seeing this earlier today. I think Ole Miss and Alabama is one. Actually, one in the Big 12, I think, with Baylor and Oklahoma State. That's say what you want, but that's got a little more pop to it now than it did a week ago.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, it does. In conclusion, I don't know. Maybe this should have been the way I led the segment. I think the Cincinnati-Notre Dame game is the most important game of the Big 12 season so far to teams that are not named Texas and Oklahoma. You need as much juice as you can get from a national scale in terms of respect for the league when that happens, which appears will be 2023.